What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 10 of Mets Off Day Live. I am your host, Chelsea Sherrod, and joining us today are Jeff Bellone, co-founder of the Mets Fits newsletter, and Ryan Finkelstein, host of the Locked on Mets podcast. We are going to talk all things Mets over the next half hour, and we will be taking some fan questions live as they come in. So make sure you put them in the chat wherever you are watching. But first, welcome to the show, guys. How you doing?
Yeah,
Doing great.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Awesome.
Wish the Mets were doing better, but here we are.
Yeah. We were just saying before we came on, thankfully we're coming into this one off a win. So vibes aren't too terrible. Before we get into the weekend series against the Dodgers, let's talk about the last off day. So Brett Beatty posted an Instagram of himself with the caption, "Don't switch up," which is kind of ironic because he cut his hair shortly after that. Starling Marte hung out with his kids in the pool. Francisco Lindor appeared on an episode of the Full Size Run Show podcast, and Jeff McNeil played in the New York State Open Championship. So, Jeff, which off day sounds best to you?
Hanging out by the pool always sounds good. But actually, I'm going to go with one not on the list. I saw Lindor was busy. He also is with Mookie Betts on Mookie Betts' podcast. I think hanging out with Mookie Betts would be a fun way to spend the off day.
Yeah, I agree. Ryan?
I'd say playing golf, but not at like an open championship in front of a bunch of people. So I don't want that type of hype surrounding me, but just a nice day on the golf course I like on an off day.
A casual day.
Yes.
I agree with that one too. Okay, let's get into where the Mets stand. So the Mets came out of the All-Star break looking pretty sluggish or lifeless, dropping the first two against the Dodgers before winning the last of the series on a walk-off by Luis Guillorme in extra innings. So Ryan, you tweeted in response to the win, "When Luis hit the pitcher with that death stare after throwing inside on the second bunt attempt, I knew he was going to win it." So be honest, Ryan, did you know that was going to happen?
I did. It doesn't make the win any sweeter for me. I called that win putting a lipstick on a pig of a series because it was, just brutal to watch. And the Mets scored 2 runs in the first 3 games. So that was, the third run they score is from the ghost runner when the infield was in expecting a bunt. He gets a ground ball through. But I did think that Guillorme was going to come through based on that look.
All right. So, Jeff, what's one thing that stood out to you from this series against LA?
I think you just look at the best players, right? Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman at the top of that Dodgers lineup. It seems like every time they come up, they deliver. And I know, Mets fans are used to that from Freddie, but compare that to what is, going on with Pete Alonso right now or Jeff McNeil. And, it's pretty simple, the difference, right? I mean, both teams had relatively good pitching. But, the Dodgers' best players, they just keep delivering in these key spots. That's been a theme of them all season, and we saw it again this weekend.
Yeah, you would think that the All-Star break would be like a moment of like a rejuvenation period. But the way that they came out, 1 hit in that first game, and then things kind of started to spiral for them. Gratefully, just like you said, Ryan, they were able to get that win, but the series all in all wasn't great. So there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done. All right, let's get into Buck Showalter and the bullpen. So all season, manager Buck Showalter's bullpen decisions have been pretty interesting, to say the least. The series against the Dodgers was no different, going with Grant Hartwig in the 1-run game Saturday and Trevor Gott instead of David Robertson in the 1-run game on Sunday. Specifically Sunday, who would you have gone to at the bullpen after Max Scherzer's 7-inning gem, Ryan?
Honestly, as much as we can look at Buck Showalter, when you have a bullpen that has 2 reliable relievers in it right now, and Brooks Raley and David Robertson, it's pretty tough on him. I think he was saving Brooks Raley to face the lefty Freddie Freeman, and they're trying to see if Trevor Gott can pitch and leverage. I think it's more a problem about the lack of arms he has. With that said, when you have a game in hand, it's probably best at this point to not worry about matchups and just go to your best pitchers. They probably should have started with Raley and then gone to Robertson.
Okay. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Mets fans are about to put a search party out for David Robertson. The guy hadn't pitched in 9 days, right? We're talking today because it's an off day. So, this has been a theme obviously all year, but it just seems like Buck, even though, as to Ryan's point, it's not like he has a ton of options in a bullpen. When you do have a game, it's a 1-run lead. You've just lost 4 in a row. You're trying to make some sort of progress here before the trade deadline where, probably the team sells off. that just seems like the right game, given the rest, that you go to your top guys. And I know the concern about the lefties, they had Freeman and Muncy coming around. This is where you don't have to pitch Robertson in the traditional closing role, right? You could have Robertson come in the eighth, go through the bottom of the lineup plus Mookie Betts, and then you could go to Raley in the ninth, assuming Robertson does his job in the eighth, to face the lefties. So I think you save Trevor Gott for maybe if you get to the 10th inning, rather than starting with him in the eighth. And now you're in a situation where you use Robertson for 2 innings anyways, which it seemed like Buck was originally reluctant to do, which is why he didn't bring him in to start the eighth to begin with.
Yeah, I just feel like Robertson has been their most reliable reliever all season. So I feel like you got to go to him if he's available. Okay, let's talk Edwin Diaz a little bit. He was at Citi Field on Saturday getting some throwing in, and Buck Showalter, when asked, said the closer is doing well and he's meeting every benchmark. What that means, he'll let me know. That's what he said. So, Jeff, do you think it's worth letting him pitch for the Mets in 2023 if recovered and if able?
Yeah, well, I feel like, Diaz is in that, quote, fun part of recovery where anything he does right now is exciting because he represents, the good from last year. Fans are excited to see him again. So I think, yes, he's meeting every benchmark, but to me, that doesn't mean we should be excited that, he needs to, hurry back considering where the Mets are in the standings. I'm a bit indifferent to whether I think there's value of him coming back, but I suppose if he were to come back in September and at least prove that he still has his dominant stuff, you feel better than going into the off season when you're considering how to structure this bullpen that, he is fully back and he is fully recovered. Versus if you wait, while that might be a little more cautious in terms of his health, it still is a lingering question mark. How does he come back, when the lights are on next year? So I think there's some value in that, but I don't think it's something that, I feel like they have to do by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and looking ahead just a little bit, Ryan, would you only let Diaz pitch if the team is contending?
I think if this was more of coming off an elbow or a shoulder, I'd be more cautious because it's a knee injury. If he's cleared to go, I don't think there's too much risk in letting him pitch at the end of the season. I think a lot of guys who are especially working through a rehab process as long as this one, you reward him by if he says he's good to go and the doctors clear him, let him pitch at the end of the year. I don't think it's something where the risk of re-injury is too drastic where you would hold him out to save him if the team's not contending. If he can go, let him go.
Okay. Jeff, how different do you think that the season would be if Robertson was the setup man for Diaz?
Yeah, I guess to the point we were just discussing, that gives Buck another option in that bullpen, right? So rather than just having, for instance, on Sunday, right now, Robertson automatically comes in the eighth because you have Diaz in the ninth. It seems like Buck keeps saving Robertson for something. I'm not sure quite what all the time, but it's really because he's stuck on, he doesn't have that, stopper in Diaz in the back of the bullpen. So he wants to keep that one, weapon to throw late. So I think that obviously makes a big difference because it pushes everyone down the pecking order. But that said, and we'll get into this in a bit, when, another issue this year is the length or lack of length that they have gotten from their starters. The middle of the bullpen that still would have to be filled by someone other than the high leverage guys has been an issue that Diaz by himself cannot fix. But again, at least it pushes everyone down the pecking order and you have just one more option for, the manager to go to in these tight games.
Yeah. Ryan, your thoughts on that, on how different the season would be?
I think it'd be a lot different. I mean, I'm not saying the Mets are suddenly going to be in the playoff mix right now, but I don't think they're this far back either. I think Diaz is probably worth 4 or 5 games. And when you're talking about the context of this race right now, that would put them a lot more closer to buying at the deadline than selling. So I think you would have made a huge difference. And also, you can't even weigh kind of the day-to-day morale difference of having that guy back there and what that could have had a trickle-down effect on the other guys in the bullpen, maybe pitching a little bit better as well.
Yeah. And speaking of the deadline, with the trade deadline creeping closer, the Mets could be sellers. They could be buyers. They could stand pat. We don't know as of right now. But at this point, Jeff, where do you think the front office stands as far as buying or selling?
I think it's pretty clear that they're going to be selling, right? I mean, I think the hope coming out All-Star break is maybe if you somehow go on some crazy run and get back into it, you have to reevaluate. But short of that, which is already off to a tough start from this weekend, you really got to look at how you can recoup some or build some capital in the prospect system. The Mets have a lot of veteran players that can help other teams. I mean, we just talked about Robertson. I mean, he's going to be a free agent after this year. So this is where you can make similar move to the Yankees did a few years back, where you could maybe trade Robertson, get something of value back, and then if you want him, you could re-sign him in the offseason. It's a little bit trickier with Scherzer and Verlander because of their no trade clauses and the size of their contracts. I think Scherzer would be much more likely than Verlander because he only has the one player option versus Verlander has a vesting option 2 years ahead. But yeah, I think they absolutely have to sell. I'm a little concerned that the current GM is the one that would make these decisions that could have long-term impacts. But we can put that aside for now. But in terms of your question, I think they definitely have to be selling.
Yeah, so Jeff mentioned Robertson, but some other obvious choices would be Tommy Pham, even Mark Canha. Brian, what do you expect them to get in return for one or three of these guys?
That's the thing I'm not really too sure about. Last year, David Robertson was in a similar position with the Cubs, was pitching well. All they got back was the 26th ranked prospect in the Philly system. So there's a lot of relievers who are going to be available at this deadline, like every deadline. I don't know how much you get back for him. I don't know how much you get back for Mark Canha or Tommy Pham. You look at the return they got for Eduardo Escobar, I wouldn't expect much more for those guys. Like if you can get one pitcher to slot at the back end of your top 10 in your farm system, that might be the best they can do here. Max Scherzer is the one interesting one. If they ate all the contract and if he pitches really well in his last two starts before the deadline, maybe you can get something in return. But as Jeff mentioned there, other teams have to weigh the fact that he's probably going to opt into $43 million. And how many teams have the stomach to take that on next year?
Right. It's a lot of money. Okay. We do have a fan question, and this comes from Lou Sheehan from YouTube. And Lou says, if the Mets sign Pete to an extension, how many more years can we expect Alonso to be a significant home run hitter? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting, right? Because before the season with Alonso's extension, the conversation about what that would be is probably a bit different than now. I think hitting home runs is not the problem, right? With Pete Alonso, we know he can hit home runs. I think you could see that over several more years. The question is, how long can he be the type of player that you pay a premium and put in the middle of your lineup? Even this year, right? We're already seeing, and potentially injury has something to do with this, but we're seeing that when you have someone hitting 180, in the middle of your lineup, that that's a problem, regardless of how many home runs he hits. So I think he's going to hit for power for a while. That's clear. He's a power hitter. That's what he does. But the Mets really need him to do more than that, and that's what they're going to have to weigh in terms of how they structured his extension.
Yeah. What do you think, Ryan?
I think that mid-30s is where these guys maybe taper off. So if you think about Alonso hitting home runs, into his age 33, age 34 season, that might be kind of the point in time where he'll continue to be a significant home run hitter. I think he means too much to the franchise not to extend, but there is that question about what you pay a first baseman only who, it only brings his value if he's hitting. If he's not, you're not getting much else. When you extend, you sign a contract to Brandon Nimmo, you at least had the thought of, okay, at least he's a great defensive center fielder. With Lindor, it was him at shortstop. So Alonso, a little more questions there.
Yeah, definitely. I think for Alonso, at least right now, he's got to get healthy. Okay, we talked a little bit about Alonso's age, but let's talk about Justin Verlander. This is 40. He came out of the All-Star break looking rocky, walking 6 in 5 innings and giving up 3 runs. SNY's John Harper said on Honda Sports Night Saturday that a scout told him his stuff isn't nearly as crisp, he isn't sharp, and he doesn't look like the same guy. So, Jeff, do you agree with this assessment of Justin Verlander?
Well, a scout knows a lot better than me, but I think all of us are seeing the same thing, right? He's obviously not the same pitcher that he was last year. You wonder with the pitch clock, but not just the pitch clock, but the lack of offense from the Mets, how that pacing has impacted him. there's several times where the Mets go up and, it's 5-6 pitches, and they get 3 outs, and Verlander just basically sat down and, maybe drank a little water. Now he's right back out there. So now being sped up, having less time, between innings, I think that has probably hurt his ability to recover the way that he's used to at his age. And that has an impact. So whether he gets used to that over time and he can kind of find a new rhythm, we'll have to see. But, to me, the biggest problem is he can't give you length when he's laboring the way he is and when his command isn't what it is. So, I'm seeing, I guess, the same thing that the scout is saying, but what I'm wondering is how much maybe an external factor like the timing has impacted him. And maybe if he were to get used to that, we would come back a little bit, not necessarily a Cy Young winner again, but something closer to what we're used to seeing from him.
Yeah, and so Ryan, do you think that Verlander will return to form, or is this just the pitcher that he is now?
I think it depends on what form you're referring to. If we're talking about last year, the 1.75
Yeah.
ERA, I don't know if we're going to see that again, but can he get to a point where he's still an effective starter for the Mets over the next couple of years? Where he's under contract? Yes. Is he going to be a Cy Young candidate? I don't know, but I think with Steve Cohen, the way the money doesn't matter as much, you almost don't need him to. You just need him to be healthy. And I think the biggest thing that I'd be looking at, second year coming off Tommy John, is that he makes it through this season healthy. And I think you might even get a better version of him next year. He had a big workload last year in his first year coming off Tommy John. So I think that's my biggest concern at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into a guy who's been pretty solid for the Mets, and that is Kodai Senga. Ryan, you said it best on Twitter this weekend. Kodai Senga being this team's ace is both amazing to watch and everything wrong with the Mets this season. In his last 8 starts, Senga has a 2.45 ERA, including a 1-run outing against the Dodgers. So, Ryan, break down what you saw from Senga on Saturday that solidified him as this team's ace.
Well, look, I think in a rotation that has 2 future Hall of Famers, Kodai Senga has had the best stuff, and that's been consistent all year. His ghost fork is one of the best strikeout pitches in baseball. Some metrics will tell you it's the best strikeout pitch in baseball, and his fastball has been really good as well. And I think the difference now with Senga is he's not walking batters. He's attacking the zone a lot more. I think he's learning the intricacies of facing MLB competition, and I've seen him kind of go to that fastball as a strikeout pitch even more, where guys maybe are sitting waiting on the ghost fork, and instead he hits them with 97 and they're caught sleeping and they're caught looking. So I've really loved what I've seen from Senga. I think at this point, he's definitely the best free agent acquisition the Mets made this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, what adjustments have you seen from Senga that have made him even more effective as the year has gone on?
Yeah, and Ryan touched on it. I think when at the start of the season, Senga, he's sounds like you're wondering, like any of us do, if you're in a new environment, like how are you going to fit in? And he started, I think he just wanted to throw his stuff. He was excited. The ghost fork got a lot of attention. I wonder if that even, got in his head a little bit of like, okay, this pitch, everyone loves it. I'm getting swing and misses. I'm going to keep going to it. But he eventually had to figure out how to pitch, not just, throw. And that's what we're seeing. And, I think recently he's been doing, they say pitching backwards, where, he's throwing breaking balls and fastball counts. He's no longer just saying fastball, now let me try to fool you with a forkball. Now, as Ryan said, 2 strikes, he might sneak a fastball down in the zone. He might mix in, another breaking pitch. So I think that's been the difference, is how he's evolved as a pitcher versus someone who came here with, a pitch with a cool name, and he was just kind of almost showing it off at first. We're past that now.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Max Scherzer, he came out of the All-Star break strong yesterday, throwing 7 solid innings of 1-hit ball after the game. He said he figured out his left foot was the reason that his slider had been so off this year. So, Jeff, what did you see out of Max Sunday that was different from his rocky starts against the Padres and the Diamondbacks?
Yeah, it's just about how he mixes in that slider when he doesn't have a good feel for it versus his other pitches. So you saw him use his cutter more often on Sunday. This is what makes these veteran pitchers, as much as, I think fans bemoan the fact that being older, they're not as good as they once were. They also are smarter, right? So, a pitcher like Scherzer can go out. He's coming out of a bullpen. Maybe he feels like his slider isn't doing what he wants it to do. He can think about different approaches and different ways to get hitters out. And I think he noted it was around the 4th inning. He figured out this idea with his footwork in terms of how to land his slider. And hopefully that makes a difference going forward. Because if you add that back to his repertoire, then I think there's a lot of hope that he can put on performances like we saw yesterday against the Dodgers.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, what would Scherzer being more consistent do for this Mets team for the rest of the season?
Give him a great chance to win every 5th day. I mean, they need that. And again, as you kind of think about Scherzer at the deadline, I think there's a better chance than not that he's sticking around. And if the Mets are going to make any push at a playoff spot this year, they need the aces to be aces, or at least one of them to be an ace and one of them to be a dependable starter. And I think Max Scherzer has shown more flashes of being a guy that can step back into that, bona fide ace role. And yesterday was a really good start, hopefully.
Yeah, that was a vintage Scherzer performance yesterday. Okay, we have another fan question, and this comes from Daniel Cassiano from YouTube. And Daniel says, why are the Mets not calling up Ronny Mauricio? Jeff, we'll start with you.
They need a place to play him, and they need to give him more time to learn a new position, right? So he's been playing some second base, but also a lot in left field. And I think the more they feel comfortable with him playing in left, and then as we get past the deadline and figure out how the roster looks in terms of if the Mets were suddenly trading away some of that outfield depth, well, you suddenly now might have an opportunity to slide him into the lineup. So I think we're close to that point where you can make the decision to call him up. But I think they're just giving him more time to feel comfortable defensively. And then they're going to figure out what they're doing with the outfield depth, and then they'll make that call.
Yeah. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've seen this year that, yes, rookies like Francisco Alvarez can provide great value, but we've also seen Brett Beatty struggle, Mark Vientos struggle, and even Alvarez has been streaky. So adding another rookie in the mix doesn't necessarily mean the Mets are definitely going to take off with Ronny Mauricio. I think right now they're trying to lean into their veterans, and there's probably a point this season the Mets aren't in the mix where either the veterans are traded or they just simply decide, look, it's time to go youth. And I think there's every chance that by the time we get to September, Mets fans get what they want, and they're seeing Ronny Mauricio, Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, and Francisco Alvarez in the lineup every day, but it might be because the Mets are out of it.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of the veterans, 4 of the veteran bats in the Mets lineup struggled this weekend against the Dodgers. So it is time for one word and why. We are going to start with Francisco Lindor. Jeff, what's your one word for him?
One word is what's tough. Better. And I guess that, do I explain it? I'm not.
You can. Yeah, sure. Why not? No, yeah.
I think it's because, to me, Lindor, with the struggles of the team, I think he sort of gets looped in with everyone else. I know he had a bad weekend against the Dodgers, but I just think better meaning he's better still than people think this year. He's done a lot of things, he's little things on the field where he makes a nice play and then he's pumping his glove to kind of get everyone excited. I think that Lindor is part of the answer, right, in terms of how this team turning around. It's just that because the team has been bad and because he signed that big contract, I think sometimes he gets heaped on more or piled on more than he should.
Okay. What's your word for Francisco Lindor, Ryan?
Rough. It was a rough weekend.
Had to think about that one. Okay, rough it is. Next up, Jeff McNeil. He went 1-for-11 against the Dodgers. Ryan, one word for him.
Trying. He's trying really hard to get out of it, and the Mets are trying to put him in position, now putting him in the 3-hole to just force McNeil out of it. There was a couple moments where we saw him hit one down the line yesterday that I think there was a little bit of hope, but there hasn't been a lot of that this year.
Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah, terrible. I mean, that just sums it up. I was trying to think of a word, maybe going back to Lindor about the car, right? I think when he won the batting title, right, he was supposed to get the car, and I don't think that has happened yet. So maybe that's the problem here. He needs Lindor to come through with that so he feels better. But no, I mean, there's no other way to put it. Terrible is the word.
Yeah, it's just all around frustrating. Okay, Brandon Nimmo, 2-for-12 with a home run and a double against the Dodgers. Jeff, what's your word for him?
Close, almost, right? Like that double looked like it was a home run. It was turned back.
Yeah.
That was the first hit the team had that night. And then everything turned after that in the series, right? They didn't get another hit that night, Friday. They didn't score the rest of the weekend. But, Nimmo, to me, he's close. He at least is giving them, something on both sides.
Yeah. Ryan?
Robbed. He was robbed of a near home run yesterday, and he was robbed by the wall. Should have had a 3 home run weekend.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Starling Marte, another guy who's, been having an up and down season. Jeff, what's your word for him?
Disappointing.
Yeah.
I'll leave it on that. I'm over explaining all the other ones, so I'll leave it at that.
Disappointing. Okay. Ryan?
Yikes. That's all I got.
Just a feeling. Yikes. Just an expression.
Every
Okay.
time he steps up.
All right. Well, we hope to see some more from these veterans because the Mets sure need it. So let's look ahead just a little bit. The Mets have a 3-game set with the White Sox and 3 with the Red Sox before their next off day a week from today. So, Ryan, what is your X factor for this 6-game stretch?
I would just say it's those veterans we just talked about, right? Can the lineup be better than it's been? I think that's the big thing for me, especially coming off this series in particular. There's been other series where we say it's the pitching. This weekend, it was this lineup just fell into a horrible slump, and they got to break out.
Yeah. What's your X factor, Jeff?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's about, the X factor is how does the team respond knowing that, the time is ticking away in terms of what the front office does at the deadline. I thought coming out of the All-Star break, I looked at there's 15 games before the deadline. I thought if the team went 11-4, that would put them above 500, and it would be a chance at that point they wouldn't, sell off. Well, they started 1-2, right? So that means they got to, have a pretty good finish here. So this 6 games, you're talking, you got to win probably 5 or 6 of them. So to me, it's about, what does the X factor, I guess, is urgency. What type of urgency do we see from the team? How are they focused on the field? We saw a lot of sloppy play this past weekend. That sense of urgency, does it manifest itself into these next 6 games?
Yeah, urgency is a really good word. Ryan, do you agree with Jeff? How many games do the Mets have to win over this next stretch to keep their season alive?
To me, it's about winning series again. So I think it's just win each of these series. I think we even saw in the 6-game winning streak, the fact that they lost that series to the Padres, it took a lot of the momentum out of it. So as much as it would be great for them to just say, hey, let's win 5 of the games or 4 of the games, I think the bigger thing is just win each of these series.
Yeah. All right. And it starts with the White Sox. Okay. Last question for the both of you. How are you spending your off day? Ryan, what do you got going on?
Well, it's a Mets off day, but I'm still working. So I'm writing about baseball for justbaseball.com today. I am not off.
Okay. Jeff?
No, I'm in the same position. I do a newsletter every day, so I'm writing trade values is my big topic today. So there you go.
All right. The work never stops. That's why you two are the best of the best. All right. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Mets Off Day Live. We will be back with another episode on Monday, July 24th at 12 p.m. Ryan and Jeff, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy your day, everyone.